Before we get started with today's show, I wanted to tell you about one of our newest podcasts, Ringer FC. Each week, Chris Ryan, Ryan O'Hanlon, Micah Peters, and various Ringer staff members will be discussing everything happening in the world of soccer. From the Premier League to the state of a game in America, let our soccer experts guide you along ahead of the 2018 FIFA World Cup. So make sure to subscribe and listen to Ringer FC wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to Ringer University. I am your host, Ben Glicksman, and it is that glorious time of year again. Signing day is over, media days are over, fall camp is over, and college football is fully back this week. And so the podcast has returned with its mega super duper preview spectacular. Before I get into this, I have some news. Mallory Rubin, the Ringer's very own mother of dragons, breaker of chains, and hater of Clemson, has graduated. She's going on to bigger and better things, and we wish her well. So in her place, I am joined this year by Rodger Sherman, a staff writer for The Ringer, who, like many others on our team, is reporting to the season in the best podcasting shape of his life. Rodger, how are you doing?
College football is back, baby. I'm excited.
We are here. So to sort of quickly run you guys through what our plan is for today, we're going to start off by going conference by conference through each of the Power Five and making one prediction each. After that, we're going to do our broader picks, talk about our 14 playoff selections, predict who's going to win the Heisman Trophy, surprise team, flop team, all of those goodies. So it should be a good podcast. So to start off, we're going to begin with a conference that is near and dear to both of our hearts, Rodger, and that is the Big Ten. So in the land of Harbaugh and the land of Urban Meyer and the land of James Franklin, where magic things happen, what is your bold prediction for the 2017 season?
I think, and I'm not confident in this, but I think that this year, with a much improved team under Chris Ash, Rutgers is going to score at least once against Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State.
Wow! So we're starting. So just to take a step back, guys, we are back to college football.
And I can't stop talking about Rutgers,
we're only
baby.
Days out from games, and the first thing we're going to talk about is
Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
Yes.
And I think last year, after getting shut out in 4 games against Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and also Michigan State, I think they're going to get on the board this year. Maybe a field goal, maybe a touchdown. Maybe they might even score against multiple teams, but I think they might even be the 13th best of the 14 teams of the Big Ten.
All right, well, really going out on a limb. Admittedly, Rutgers is not one of the programs I had done a lot of prep work on heading into this podcast, so all I can tell you is they were bad last year. I don't think they will be very good this year, but really going out on a limb there. When they score that touchdown, I will reach out to you.
They'll fire the cannons. Last year they lost 78-0 to Michigan, and they didn't get to fire the cannons except at the end of the game, which was the saddest thing I've ever seen in college football. So I think things are moving up. Do you have takes about actual, important football teams?
I do. I do. No offense to Rutgers. I'm sorry for not being fully prepared to dive into a deep breakdown of your strengths and weaknesses. I want to talk about Michigan. Michigan obviously had an extremely good season last year, and they seem to be a team in the Big Ten East who is sort of being projected as third. And I think a lot of people are saying that Michigan this season is sort of overrated, that they're primed for a step back. My prediction is heading into the regular season finale against Ohio State that they'll have a chance to win the division and be very much in the playoff hunts. I think you look at the players that they've lost, and it's jarring. Jabril Peppers is gone, Taco Charlton is gone, Amara Darbo is gone, Jordan Lewis is gone, Jake Butt is gone, Ben Gideon's gone. There are a lot of people who are walking out the door, but you look at Jim Harbaugh's resume. In his third season at San Diego, that team took a drastic leap. In his third season at Stanford,
we all know.
And his third season at Stanford, they took a drastic leap. And the talent is still there. Wilton Spate, now with a healthy collarbone, not trying to play through a broken collarbone anymore, is returning. Chris Evans is back at running back. Rashawn Gary, who was the #1 recruit in the nation a couple years ago, is leading the defensive line. So yeah, I just have a lot of faith in Michigan this year, despite the fact that a lot of people seem to be a little bit more hesitant on the Wolverines.
And, I mean, when you mentioned Wilton Spate and that injury, they did not lose until he got injured. So he might not seem like the best quarterback in the world, but their troubles last year started against Iowa when he got injured, and it is odd with that sort of very poorly stacked conference situation the Big Ten has with Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State last year. Not technically, Penn State won, even though they were the team that for most of the year people thought of as not even a contender in the division. I still think Michigan might be the second or third best team there. I think Ohio State is clearly the team that's ahead of the pack, but that's reasonable to say at the end of the year if they flip the game, which, by the way, they were inches, less than a foot from winning last year. I think, there's a route to the playoff there, even if they haven't gotten there under Jim Harbaugh. It's so devastating that they haven't been to the playoff in 2 years that Jim Harbaugh has been there.
Yeah, it never finished better than third in the Big Ten East is what the haters will say. But that spot that you mentioned, not controversial at all. I think the other thing that will help Michigan this year is they close the season against Wisconsin and Ohio State. They're going to be using a lot of young players, and by sort of having two of their biggest games, Penn State is a little bit earlier in the season, but by having two of their biggest games that late in the calendar, that gives guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones, their touted receiver, and a lot of these other freshmen and sophomores time to really sort of find their stride and have Michigan sort of in prime position to contend for a playoff in what is sort of being billed by a lot of analysts as a rebuilding season. The spot still remains, I think, one of my favorite college football things because there was just no defining. They might have gotten that stop. It's unclear. There was just no right angle there. So who knows if. But moving forward, they could be in the mix again. Yeah. Right. Best part about college football is that there is never a right or wrong answer. There is just a lot of loud arguing, and that is what people like us are here for. Yeah,
it's much better that there wasn't a correct answer there, because otherwise what would people be doing on Twitter if not yelling about a few inches in a game that happened last November?
Exactly. All right, so let's move on from the Big Ten to the Conference of the Defending Champions, the ACC. Florida State is supposed to be extremely good this year. Clemson, who was never doubted on this podcast last year, is once again supposed to be very good. The reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Lamar Jackson, is in this conference. Rodger, what do you really have your eye on or think is going to happen in the ACC this season?
I think Louisville can come away from this conference and win it. They had a terrible end to last season with, after Lamar Jackson basically sealed the Heisman, things really went downhill for them. He got sacked, I think, somewhere between 10 and 17 times against Houston. They lost their bowl game. They lost to Kentucky, which is not a good sign ever for any football team at any level. But they trounced Florida State. They won by 43 points against Florida State.
Not close.
No, they came a few yards short of beating Clemson, which is the national champion. So two really strong performances against the two teams we all presume will win this conference this year. I think Louisville should not be forgotten about in this calculus of the ACC. And I don't think Lamar Jackson will win the Heisman again because it's hard to do that twice in a row. No one wants to vote for you if you've already won it before. We've seen that happen over and over again. But he's still very good at football. Even if he has similar numbers this year, he might not win the Heisman. But I think Louisville can win this conference. Will they? Do you think so?
I do not think Louisville will win this conference. I do think a lot of people are sleeping on them, and I do think Lamar Jackson is sort of getting lost in the Sam Darnold shuffle right now, where everyone's focusing on sort of Darnold as the college football QB of the moment and forgetting about the guy who had more than 5,000 total yards from scrimmage last year.
He was amazing and deserved that Heisman, and he's still there. And if he doesn't get sabotaged by his own offensive line this year, which could happen.
It could happen. We call that the Hackenberg.
Well, I think I'm going to also say bold prediction that Lamar Jackson is better than Christian Hackenberg, who's currently in the NFL.
Yes.
Bobby Petrino makes weird things happen.
Weird is a gentle way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's a gentle way of putting it. For my prediction, I actually want to talk about a different QB in the ACC. Everyone knows Lamar Jackson. Everybody knows DeAndre Francois. The guy I want to talk about plays in the Coastal Division, and his name is Josh Jackson. He's the redshirt freshman quarterback for Virginia Tech. The Coastal Division is historically the ACC shit show division. No one really has a sense for
know which teams are.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knows which teams are in it. Miami is rumored to be good every year. They always sort of play right around the sort of 15 to 30 range, at least over the past few seasons. North Carolina has made some runs. The team I'm really interested in, though, is Virginia Tech. And that's because of Jackson, and that's because of their head coach, Justin Fuente. Fuente took over the program before last season. When he was hired, I think everybody pretty much unanimously thought, okay, that's a good hire. He did really, really good things at Memphis. But you look at his history of quarterbacks. Back when he was the offensive coordinator at TCU, that's when Andy Dalton played there, and he had a huge, huge college career. He gets to Memphis, he turns Paxton Lynch from an unheralded recruit into a first-round NFL draft pick. Now, whether Lynch has NFL success is sort of beside the point. He got into the first round of the draft from Memphis. And then last year he took Gerard Evans, who no one was really talking about in the preseason, and made him one of the most effective quarterbacks in college football. Josh Jackson looks the part. He's 6'1", he's 215 pounds, he can throw, he can run. And in a Coastal Division that, like we mentioned, is wide open, I could see some big things happening.
So just for starters, just to make sure, can you name half of the other teams in the Coastal Division just to...
Miami, North Carolina, Pitt, Georgia Tech.
I think that's half.
I think we got it. Good. I'm glad we'll before I offend some fan base unforgivably, we'll cut it off.
I don't think ACC fans know which ones are coastal and which ones are. I know that the good ones are in the Atlantic one.
Yeah, they just root for Belk. Rooting for the Belk Bowl is the most important thing you can do as an ACC fan. All right.
And I haven't heard much about Jackson as a recruit. He was a 3-star recruit, but it's more about what you think Fuente can do than what you know of Jackson. It sounds like.
Yeah, so Jackson.
He's a freshman.
He's a redshirt freshman. There were reports last year during fall camp that he was pushing Gerard Evans for the starting job. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, Evans won, and obviously that was the right call. But there were reports of that. In high school, he had a really strong senior year. He's from around the Ann Arbor area, threw for almost 2,000 yards, rushed for almost 500 yards, I believe. So has shown to be able to do sort of stuff with both his arms and his legs, like we said. So I like his skill set, but yeah, like you mentioned, I feel really good about him, mostly because of the system he's in and the coach that he has.
Let's move on to the Big 12.
Let's do it. What is your Big 12 pick here?
I think everyone in the Big 12 is going to immediately regret the decision to bring back the Big 12 championship game that they had to They had to fight to have the waiver that you don't need 12 teams in the conference. I think that you're adding an extra game for your best team that they're probably going to have a 30 to 40% chance of losing on the eve of the college football playoff. And it's not like the setup in the ACC where you have the Atlantic and the Coastal and one has a good team and the other is sending Duke into the title game. It's going to be the best team against the second best team. It's going to be a guaranteed tough game for the team that they'll want to be in the playoff. I think it'll be a damn disaster no matter whatever the teams are, whether it's Oklahoma State, somehow Tom Herman puts something together at Texas. Whoever the best team is will lose that game, I promise. I don't know who it is. I just know that it will be bad for the Big 12.
The Big 12, basically every decision the Big 12 has made since I can remember closely following college football has been inexplicable to some degree. I mean, from a financial perspective, obviously this makes sense. It's another payday for all of the programs that are in the Big 12. But you're right. There's no division, so if the best two teams in the Big 12 turn out to be Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, which I believe are the top
which happened
two
last year.
Which happened last year, and I believe those are the top two teams in the AP poll entering the season from the conference.
And they'd play weird Bedlam, and then they'd play Bedlam again in a different place.
A week later for the championship. It's going to be... Yeah, basically whatever choice the Big 12 makes, even if it was the rational one, it will not work out. So they could have they got messed up by the fact that they didn't have a championship game in 2014. They decided to add one. It's going to backfire. That they are the conference that is they've taken the Oklahoma State Pistol Pete's guns and shot themselves in the foot with it. I could see that. I could see that. So the Big 12 for me is really hard to make sense of. So I was sort of pouring through, figuring out like which of these teams I actually like. So Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield's back. Awesome. Love their offense. Their defense is still bad, I think it would be safe to say. Like, they got torched last year. I don't have any faith in Mike Stoops. So I sound like I'm higher on their offense than you are, and their defense is clearly the weaker part of their team.
Oh, no, I think they might have the best offense in the country. But they're amongst a lot of other teams that have great offenses and no defense. I think they'll need a defense to really contend for like the national championship, and they just promoted their 33-year-old air raid offensive coordinator to be the head coach and lost a guy who came up as a defensive backs coach. It's like they focused even more on their one strength, and that could be a problem if they have to play like in the playoff or something.
Speaking of offense, the guy that I want to talk about from the Big Ten is
Big 12.
Big 12. Let's focus on the Big 12. The guy I want to talk about from the Big 12 is my favorite, your favorite, college football's favorite, Kenny Hill. Kenny Trill, still at TCU, 22 years old, going on 38, 9th or 10th year senior, somehow is still around. I am 100% in on the Kenny Trill going out with a bang during his 15th year senior season at TCU.
Can he add a real Heisman next to his September Heisman from the year that Johnny Manziel graduated and he threw for 500 yards in one game, and people said, my God, he's the next Johnny Football.
Look, I can't quit him. That was 2014 against South Carolina, Thursday night, opening night of the season, went for 511 yards and 3 touchdowns. Since then, he's been more bad than good, I would say.
Yeah.
But you look this offseason, you have gotten all of the sort of off-season redemption stories. He has quotes about talking about how when he Googles himself, the first thing that comes up is his mugshot. I love that. I'm 100% in on him using that as motivation. He spent part of the offseason training with college football's favorite QB guru / Jedi, George Whitfield. 100% in on that. And he may have ended last season like pretty poorly, but there's not a lot of defense in the Big 12, and I just cannot get that 2014 performance out of my head, and I'm going to believe in Kenny Trill until the day that he's no longer a member of the college football universe.
Does he still like being called Kenny Trill?
No, I think he's hung it up.
Yeah,
he's like officially hung it up. That's part of the all of these stories about him turning the pages. He's now Kenny Hill.
So you're going to keep. So you're like his biggest fan, but also his worst enemy because you keep bringing up.
Yeah. It's hard to reconcile. Maybe if you just go by Ken. If he was just Ken Hill, I know that's his father who was a Major League Baseball player.
Here's a quote from Kenny Hill. Man, I'm old.
True.
This is what you're excited about.
I'm in on him. Let's go from the Big 12 out west, Rodger. We're going to talk about the Pac-12, the teams of note entering this season. USC, who finished last season quite strong.
Yes, I would say.
Have a QB that people are excited about.
Yes.
Stanford, steady as always, is in the division. Oregon looking to take a step back after being an enormous disaster last season. Josh Rosen, still there. He's sort of being
Still alive,
overshadowed
yes.
by Darnold. In the Pac-12, what's your big prediction for the 2017 campaign?
And did you mention Washington even?
I did not even mention the defending playoff.
The defending playoff participant and conference champion.
Correct.
So my team in this conference is Stanford, which I feel like is the least exciting of all of the things, but I don't have a lot of faith in Washington.
What's that?
I didn't even have faith in them as they were doing really well last year, which is and their streak of doing really well included them kind of getting run off the field by USC. Not run off the fields, but they didn't look like the better team. They lost by multiple scores. USC, I'm just trying to slightly dampen the bridled enthusiasm. As someone who roots for the New York Jets in the NFL, I just know that Sam Darnold is somehow going to disappoint me, whether this year or in 10 years or in 3 years, more likely. I don't have any concrete evidence to believe that because he was great last year, but statistically, he looks great throwing the ball. They won every game but literally the first one he played in. I am sticking with the team that it's impossible to get excited about, the one that's just gonna have a bunch of enormous humans blocking the way for Power O. I believe in Stanford. Do you believe in Stanford?
I'm a big believer in Stanford. We see this conference very similarly. So your big prediction is that Stanford wins the conference?
Yes, I'm going in on Stanford.
Okay. I see very much eye to eye with you on the Pac-12. My big prediction is not about Stanford. It is about USC. I think USC starting 1-2. I think they're losing 2 of their first 3 games.
So
So let me take a step back. This has nothing to do with USC being a team that flopped when Lane Kiffin was the coach and Matt Barkley was the quarterback. This has nothing to do with the recent history. It has to do with their defense lacking depth. Mm-hmm. They have a couple of really good players, but their big issue last year was they couldn't get after the quarterback and they weren't great in the trenches. They had a Dory Jackson, they had Cameron Smith at linebacker. Their front four was not so great. Their second game is against the team you just mentioned, Stanford, who, when you don't have a good front four, coming after a team that plays 15 offensive linemen at the same time is a very difficult task. And both of us are high on Stanford. Stanford is going to have a bye week to prepare for that game. And at this point, Clay Helton obviously did a really good job last year not picking Brown over Darnold's coming out of camp notwithstanding.
He made the wrong decision.
He did make the wrong decision, but then corrected it. I think Stanford wins that game, though. I'm on the same page as you, as I think Stanford's the better team. The game after that for USC is against Texas. And Texas is one of those Big 12 teams that I don't know entirely what to make of them. I like Shane Bichelle. I like Malik Jefferson. I have a lot of questions about whether they're going to be a legitimate Big 12 contender or whether they're going to sort of show glimpses like they have the past few seasons and then disappoint like they also have the past few seasons. But the stat that I keep coming back to is, do you know what Tom Herman, the new head coach of Texas's record is when he's a Vegas underdog?
Let me know.
Going back to the time that he was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, 11-0. He has never lost as an underdog.
So
that includes Cardale Jones' run through the playoff. That includes Houston beating Florida State in the Peach Bowl. That includes Houston beating Oklahoma in last year's opener. That includes Houston beating Louisville. I have a lot of faith in him, and I think this is going to be the first sort of really big game that Texas can get up for, and it's going to mean a lot more to the Longhorns. So I have them just sort of mapping out the season in my head, beating USC. I think USC is going to be good this year. I don't want to say USC is going to then go on to lose every game or have a Notre Dame-like 4-8 season. I think USC is going to be good. They're going to make a good bowl game, but I'm with you in liking Stanford and thinking that people may be a little too reckless with their Trojans optimism right now.
It's easy to get excited about a team that went, just killed the last end of the season, but Sam Darnold wasn't the entire reason that or Max Brown wasn't the entire reason they weren't winning at the beginning of the year.
No, Alabama in the opener scored quite a lot of points against USC.
Yes. Max Brown could have thrown 4 touchdowns there, and they still would have been down by several touchdowns. So,
all right, Rodger, we're going to the conference. We saved the biggest and best for last. If recent college football history is any indication, we're talking about the SEC, and as I like to call it, the Nick Saban conference. So, Rodger, there are a lot of teams, but mainly there's Alabama. What is your big prediction SEC-wise heading into 2017?
My bold prediction here is that Alabama is going to be really good.
Really, really going out on a limb, earth-shattering. You heard it here first.
I think they're gonna win. I think they're going to a bowl for sure.
That's good. Yeah, the Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl.
Yeah, Gasparilla. Could you please?
I can't.
I don't actually know if that's how it's pronounced. It could be Gasparilla. But yeah, Alabama. They're still coached by Nick Saban. They were 1 play away from winning the national championship game last year. I think they're good.
So when you say good, do you mean like undefeated good? Do you mean...
I'm not going to elaborate more. I just want our listeners to be prepared for them winning several games this year.
I think that's good. I have... My prediction actually sort of goes counter to that just a little bit. I think Bama's going to lose a conference game. I think they're going to lose one SEC conference game.
They're going to play. I mean, I think LSU and Auburn are 2 of the top 10, 15 teams in the country this year.
Yeah.
It is a gauntlet.
So here's the thing. That should not be a bold prediction.
Yeah.
Like, a team losing 1 game in conference should not be a bold prediction. But Alabama has not lost a conference game since September 19th, 2015 against Ole Miss. And in order for them to lose that game a few years ago, it took 5 turnovers and one of the flukiest touchdown passes I've ever seen by Chad Kelly. Mm-hmm. And since then, they've just beaten the crap out of everybody. The reason that I do feel like they are going to lose one this year is, 1, their defense loses a lot. They have a ton of talent waiting in the wings. There's no denying that Nick Saban is going to have a good defense. But whether it's up to the caliber of last year is very much in question. They had 7 guys go in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft this spring, which is just an absurd number. That includes Jonathan Allen, Ryan Anderson, and Tim Williams, who were their 3 best pass rushers last year. So that is one of the reasons I have question marks for them to sort of lose 1 game. The other reason has to come back to what you said. LSU, I think, is going to be really good. I think their defense was incredibly efficient last year after Les Miles left. When they played Alabama, it was 0-0 going into the 4th quarter. And this year they brought in Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator, who at Pitt torched Clemson. I think the combination of Matt Canada and Dave Aranda as the defensive coordinator is one of the sort of the top pairings, if not the top pairing in the country.
Such a good, especially with, say what you will about the Coach O, but, people sometimes wonder if he's a strategic mastermind as opposed to a recruiter.
Right.
And to have 2 coordinators of that level, that caliber, I really like LSU.
Yeah, in Auburn, like you mentioned, I've long been a believer in Gus, but you look at his skill players this year. They got Jared Stidham, a transfer from Baylor, who
former 5-star.
Yeah, who
played great at Baylor.
Yeah, when he was on the field, he was excellent. They have Cameron Petway, who there's a lot of love going to a lot of running backs in the preseason. Saquon Barkley, Darius Geis, Bo Scarborough. There's not a lot of people talking about Cameron Petway, but that guy is good. That guy, when he was on the field and healthy last season, was absolutely torching defenses. And you even look at teams like Mississippi State with Nick Fitzgerald. There are teams in the SEC this year that have actually competent dual-threat quarterbacks, and those seem to be the only teams that have beaten Alabama during the time Nick Saban has been there, from Deshaun Watson to Trevor Knight, I guess, is one of the guys who's beaten him. But, But yeah, I think Alabama is going to be extremely good. I agree with your prediction. I also think they're going to lose a conference game in 2017.
And that doesn't necessarily mean they won't be national champions. In fact, they seem to have a higher win rate when they entered the championship game with a loss. It's nice to get one out of the way ahead of time. That's not a real thing. People say it a lot, but it does.
It's a talking head. It's a talking head breakdown, and we're going to buy into it completely.
Yes, it just means if you lose a game, you can still make the playoff and still win 2 games of the playoff.
Exactly. So that is a natural transition. We're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, and when we come back, we are going to run through our rapid fire picks for the playoff, for the Heisman Trophy, surprise team, flop team, all those goodies. Support for today's show comes from Audible. Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading publishers, broadcasters, entertainers, and business information providers. Unlike a streaming or rental service, with Audible, you own your books, so you can access them anytime, anywhere, from almost any device, including your iPhone, iPad, Android, Amazon Fire tablets, or Windows Phone. Plus, thanks to the Great Listen Guarantee, if you don't like your title, you can swap it for a new one. Not to mention, Audible Channels gives you a collection of exclusive originals, short stories, and comedy, so you can always have something new to listen to.
You know, my girlfriend and I listened to the Game of Thrones books on Audible, which actually, now she is a person who refers to things that happened in the books when something cool happens on TV. So it was a great listening experience, but now the TV show just
doesn't stack up.
Yeah.
Just doesn't stack up. So get your free audiobook with a 30-day trial at www.audible.com/ringeru. That's www.audible.com/RINGERU for a free audiobook with your 30-day trial. And now back to Ringer University. All right, Rodger, we went conference by conference. Now we are getting to the good stuff. We're going to talk about playoff picks. We're going to talk about the Heisman Trophy. But first, I want to ask you, who is your surprise team? We talked about conference by conference, teams from Alabama to Rutgers, all very important.
A to R, baby. There are no Z teams in college football, so we had to cut it short.
There are not. So tell me, Rodger, which team that not a lot of people are talking about are you 100% in on this season?
I believe that with a solid offense and something slightly resembling a defense, Wazoo is my pick to be slightly ahead of expectations. They don't need a good defense. They just need one that's better than like 50th or 60th in the country. And they've been putting that together over the past few years. They are ranked in the preseason polls at like 24th. So maybe I'm not going too out on a limb here, but I just want once in my life to see Mike Leach actually put together a team that isn't so obviously predictable that it has a great offense and no chance of winning a bunch of games. So
when you say that you're in on Washington State, what are you talking ceiling-wise here?
This is really a double whammy because my pick for a flop team is also Washington. So
wow, getting them both out of the way. Let's just go.
I just think that obviously I'm a huge fan of the Apple Cup. It's one of my favorite fruit-related rivalry games in all of college football.
And there are many.
And so I think Washington, after a great season last year, I earlier defamed their season last year, but they had a great year. Chris Peterson's a good coach. But this year, I am all in on Washington State, and I think they're going to win the Apple Cup and probably about 9-10 games.
That would be a good season.
That'd be a great
really,
season
really
for
good
Wazoo.
season in Pullman.
And of course, what'll actually happen is they'll give up 40 points a lot. But I want to believe in them very badly.
The thing is, when you give up 40 points, it's sometimes possible to win games if you throw the ball 83 times and score 60.
Hercules Mataafa, 13.5 tackles for loss last year. I just like saying Hercules Mataafa.
I'm not even going to try to say that, but that was impressive. Hercules, I can say. Not going to try to attempt the last name. So my surprise team, Rodger, is a team that I also predicted big things out of last year. and did not happen. And I'm talking about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
No.
I'm talking about Notre Dame, Rodger.
No.
I'm talking about Notre Dame. Let me clear out here first. Last year, for the listeners who did not tune into our preseason mega show in 2016, I predicted that Notre Dame would make the college football playoff. It turns out that Notre Dame finished 4-8, which is not good enough to make the college football playoff. 4-8, for those of you who don't know, is 4 wins and 8 losses.
Huh.
Yeah, so not ideal. This year, however, Notre Dame is weirdly underrated, which is like a weird thing to say about Notre Dame, who's constantly overhyped. But here's why I'm a believer. Brandon Wimbush is back. Josh Adams is back. They have one of the most experienced offensive lines in the country. If you look at their losses last year, of which there were many, 7 of the 8 were by 1 possession. So it's not like they were getting the shit kicked out of them, even if they were consistently bad. It's not like they were consistently terrible. And there is a difference there. So, and you look at their schedule this year, there are a lot of winnable games. Bill Connolly has an S&P Plus system that sort of predicts who's favored in each game. And if you guys aren't following Bill Connolly, he is one of the foremost college football experts. Read everything he does on SB Nation. But he has Notre Dame favored in 8 games this year. Favored. And the other 4 are toss-ups. I am not going to be dumb enough to pick Notre Dame to go to the playoff this year. But like you were saying with Washington State, 9 wins, I think it's doable.
Yeah, and, so I'm going to agree with you on part of this. Obviously, they have a lot of highly touted recruits because they're Notre Dame.
Yep.
Last year, they had close losses against a tough schedule.
Yep.
Typically, when that happens, you bounce up because, you were really right there against a lot of good teams. But on the other hand, Notre Dame trash, and I have no faith in them. And I want Brian Kelly very badly to get fired. I think he's a bad person and a bad coach. And I don't like them. So I agree with you in principle that, this is not only a team. Actually, I'll go even a little further. I think this is a team that, we could see, they have the talent and everything else to be a top 15, top 10 team, not top 10, top 15 team. But I just don't. And they lose, if I'm not mistaken, both coordinators.
Yep.
They lose DeShone Kizer.
He was very good. They definitely lose a lot of talent, but it is weird that Notre Dame has as much talent as they do, has as manageable a schedule as they do, and are entering the season unranked.
DeShone Kizer was maybe the most talented quarterback last year. Brian Kelly is a person who ruins things, including DeShone Kizer in college, and he did not play up to his potential.
All right. Well, I am not going to argue with you. I believe in Notre Dame this year. I think we'll leave it at that, and we'll move on to our flop team. Rodger,
I've already said Washington.
You said that Washington is your flop team.
Yes.
So I'm going to go with my flop team, which I think will be less controversial than the Notre Dame pick. I have Oklahoma State as my flop team. We talked about the Big 12 being completely wide open this season. And while, like Oklahoma, I love Oklahoma State's offense. Mason Rudolph threw for more than 4,000 yards with 28 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions last year. James Washington is maybe my favorite receiver in college football. He's just one of those guys who is, come NFL draft season, is going to be someone that people are like, why have I not heard about James Washington if I haven't watched college football all year? But their defense is bad. It's not a good defense. They finished 84th in yards per play allowed last year. They finished 92nd in completion percentage against. I think the only stat that they were really good at on defense last year is turnovers. And turnovers is one of those things that tends to fluctuate wildly from season to season. It's hard to be really good at the turnover margin year after year after year. And I think Oklahoma State is going to be good. I think they're going to be competitive. I just don't see them as a legitimate playoff contender. I think they're a team that could finish anywhere from 6-6 to 10-2, and I would just look at it at the end of the year and say, yeah, that looks about right.
So Oklahoma, we talked about how there's a big difference between their offense and defense.
Yep.
They're ranked number one in, again, Bill Connolly's S&P Plus offense projections, 40th in defense. That's a pretty big disparity, right?
Yep.
Oklahoma State, second, right behind them in offensive S&P Plus, 67th in defensive. So whatever awkward shootout losses Oklahoma gets into, we can expect Oklahoma State to get into slightly more of them, and I think it's Oklahoma's conference to lose. But again, like I said, that Big 12 championship game might feature both of them, and the worst team will win.
Very feasibly. All very feasible. Let's go from surprise teams and flop teams to our prediction for the first coach fired. Rodger, who is going to be the first coach to get the axe this season?
I am very excited about something we just talked about, and it is the potential for Brian Kelly getting fired.
Wow. First coach fired?
I know it's a lot because I just want to talk about him getting fired so much. And, you know, I would love it if they lost right off the bat to Temple. Maybe not. Georgia early, Michigan State early. So first coach, you know, logistically it would be weird. But if they get off to an ugly start, you know, 2-3, 2-4, what are they waiting for? I know they paid him a lot of money very recently, but everybody hates him, including me. Hopefully you too. They went 4-8 last year, and if they're heading in that direction again, they're not going to make it up in the second half of the season. I believe in very few things as much as I believe in Brian Kelly's awfulness.
Rodger, I regret to inform you that the thing that Brian Kelly is sort of waiting for is the head coaching opening for the New York Jets. And when he becomes the Jets head coach, we will make sure to have you on the NFL, the Ringer NFL show with Robert Mays and Kevin Clark to fully rant about how awful Brian Kelly is and how this will ruin your sports fandom, really, irrevocably.
Our podcast apparently has devoted the New York Jets to college football. We're discussing them on this podcast instead of the NFL one. We were talking about the 130 college football teams and the worst one in the NFL.
The Rutgers of the NFL.
Yes. And, you know, they're not far apart.
Very close in proximity.
New Jersey, the wasteland of football.
Okay. As my pick for the first coach to be fired is actually from a similar region of the country as Rutgers and the New York Jets. It's Steve Addazio of Boston College. Steve, just a football dude, as he will tell you through all of his various social media platforms. But he's gone 24-27 in his tenure at Boston College. He was almost fired last year before BC rebounded and won their last couple games and got to a bowl. But you look at their schedule, they play Notre Dame, who we've talked about at length. They play Clemson, they play Virginia Tech, they play Louisville, and they play Florida State as 5 of their first 9 games. And after that Florida State game is a bye, and that's when I think we'll be saying goodbye to Steve.
They are so beautifully awful at offense, and there is no hope of them getting better while he's there. There is just no hope of them ever having a competent offense under Steve Addazio.
Yeah, Steve.
And their defense has been competent, if not good. If it ranks highly in any stats, like they're often towards the top of the country in defensive stats, but yeah, it's just like brutally unenjoyable to witness Boston College football.
Yeah, I don't see him getting past this season.
He's a dude, but
he's a dude, but not a good enough dude to remain the long-term coach of the Eagles.
In the end, he will be felled by their lack of dudes.
Let's move to the Heisman Trophy winner, who presumably will not be coming from Boston College.
No, unless the punter has a great year.
Can't rule it out. Rodger, who was your pick to win the Heisman this season?
We've talked about Oklahoma's offense, how off the charts it can be, and I think Baker Mayfield, as a senior who has not won the Heisman Trophy yet, his quarterback's coach has just been made the head coach. They're going to win a lot of games by scoring a lot of points. I think I think he'll be the favorite to. I think he should be the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy.
I think I see him getting another trip to New York. I don't see him winning. My pick is another quarterback. I'm going with DeAndre Francois of Florida State. A little bit of a sleeper, but not that far off the radar. So here's my thinking. We talked about Lamar Jackson. I love Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is incredible. It's just hard to win the Heisman Trophy 2 seasons in a row.
He'd have to improve on what he did last year.
Exactly. So last year he combined for 5,114 total yards and 51 combined touchdowns. Improving on that is just really, really freaking hard to do, and that's going to be the expectation for him if he's going to win the award. So that's why I didn't pick him. I didn't pick a running back just because it's really hard for a running back to win the Heisman. So as much as I love Saquon Barkley, as much as I love Darius Geis, as much as I love Cameron Petway and Bo Scarborough and all those backs in the SEC we talked about, Nick Chubb is still around. It's just hard to win the Heisman as a running back.
The Heisman, by the way, is stupid. Moving on. Keep going.
So it's hard to win the Heisman as a running back. So basically, I considered Mayfield. I considered J.T. Barrett, who was my pick last year to win the Heisman. Ultimately, I went with Francois because I think his upside is the highest of the three, even if Mayfield has been the most consistent so far. And I just think his team is going to be the best. And again, regardless of how you feel about how people vote for the Heisman, I think Florida State is going to be a better team than Oklahoma, and I think if you're the quarterback of a team who, we'll get to it in a second, I think could make the playoff, it really puts you in an advantageous position with voters.
No thoughts from either of us on Sam Darnold?
Wow, we didn't even mention Sam Darnold.
Who's the favorite?
Who's the far and away favorite. So the thing with Sam Darnold, I mean, I talked about it. I think USC starts 1-2, and if I think USC is going to lose 2 of their first 3 games, I think it would be really hard for him to win the Heisman after
Early
that.
Season production goes a long way, as evidenced by what Lamar Jackson did last year.
Exactly. The first impression is so huge. And Darnold he's not expected to put up Lamar Jackson numbers, especially now with his legs, but he's going to be expected to do a ton. And if he doesn't match the anticipated level of production right out of the gate, I think it could be a death sentence for his Heisman campaign.
You know, it has to be a quarterback from a good team. Eventually, we could see Baker Mayfield lose the Heisman because his defense gave up 67 points.
That's how the Heisman works.
It's a nice old trophy that's very pretty.
Yeah. We will talk about it more over the course of this podcast in weeks to come. All right, so let's get to it, Rodger. Who are your 4 playoff teams? Who are we going to be talking about sort of in those 3 weeks between games and in the semifinals this year, and sort of plan for it all here?
Earlier I said Alabama will be good. I think they will make the playoff. Okay. I'm gonna say Alabama, Ohio State. I'm very passionate about the Stanford Cardinal, apparently.
Okay.
But if they win the Pac-12, like I said, if Louisville.
Wow.
Okay, sorry. I jumped the gun here. If Louisville does damage to Clemson and/or Florida State, I think there's the potential for that conference to the ACC, no matter how many good teams it has, to sort of eat away at itself. And I'm picking Oklahoma at 4th.
Okay. So you have Oklahoma, you have Ohio State, you have Stanford, and you have Alabama. Who do you have as your champion?
Alabama. They're good at football.
It's a smart pick. It's a smart pick. The thing about Alabama, we'll talk about sort of more about why they're going to be good in weeks to come, because there's going to be plenty of time this season to talk about why Alabama's going to be good, as opposed to plenty of time to talk about Rutgers. So we're gonna save that talk for later. But Alabama, hard to knock that pick, hard to criticize that pick.
Got to talk about Rutgers.
My 4 playoff teams, I have Alabama making the playoff as well. I have Ohio State making the playoff as well. I do have Florida State making it out of the ACC.
Fine.
And I also have Stanford. We are very much in alignment on Stanford.
Wow.
I think this is the most pro-Stanford college football podcast in 2017 at the very least.
I think people in Stanford podcast. I think Stanford has podcasters.
Do you think? Well, 100% of the people on this podcast believe that Stanford is going to make the playoff.
Yeah, it's weird. I like picked those teams, and now I'm hoping no one like publishes it anywhere because I feel dumb saying Clemson and Florida State are not in. So please, if you're listening to this, do not tell anybody that I said that stuff.
Great. Clemson, we doubted again. Clemson last year on this podcast, it was sort of a running joke that we doubted them at every turn, and then they won the national championship. So this is surely a sign that Clemson will repeat.
They don't have
Deshaun Watson.
They don't have Deshaun Watson.
They don't have Deshaun Watson. He's pretty good.
No, I think they're going to be very good. I don't think they should be in the national title conversation.
That's fair.
I mean,
I feel the same way, but I also doubted Clemson last year, and now
yeah, but last year they had Deshaun Watson, so you were doubting a team with Deshaun Watson, and this year you're doubting a team that's starting Kelly Bryant.
That is the quarterback. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sold on him. He seems somewhat mediocre. So book it.
My national title pick of those, I did not take Alabama, despite the fact that I have them in the playoff. I'm going with Ohio State.
Thank you for picking a team that isn't Alabama.
Yeah, Ohio State is basically, if you're not going to pick Alabama and want to make the safest possible pick, Ohio State probably is that pick.
That's
Urban
fair.
Meyer is a national champion head coach. J.T. Barrett is probably the most seasoned quarterback other than Baker Mayfield in college football. They have a new offensive coordinator, Kevin Wilson, who comes over from Indiana, made Indiana's offenses really, really successful. And before that was one of the most successful offensive coordinators in recent history at Oklahoma when he worked with Stoops. And their defense last year, ranked third in the nation in yards per play, outside of Alabama's defense, was one of the best handful of defenses in the nation, and they bring back so many key returnees, and we haven't even mentioned running back Mike Weber, who is just a beast. So I see Ohio State doing big things. I see them getting to the playoff again this year, less controversially, and in winning the whole thing.
So we've actually kind of made similar predictions, because I predicted that Rutgers is going to score a point against Ohio State and Michigan after they failed to last year. And you're predicting that Ohio State will score a point in the playoff this year after they failed to do so last year.
Exactly. Predictions are exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So to close out this podcast, Rodger, we should mention that week 1 games are only a few days away.
And they are amazing.
What is the game, storyline, player that you're most looking forward to this weekend?
I mean, they're Alabama and FSU are playing each other right now.
Week 1, the first game of the season.
They could both win the national championship conceivably. They might be the 2 best teams in the country, and they're playing week 1. We've had big week 1 games before, but nothing like this. It changes. It could change the course of the season right now. It will, because one of those teams is going to have a very slim margin for error to make the playoff, and we're getting it right now. And it's like it's jarred me back into college football excitement so quickly. It's bringing me something that Stanford versus Rice in Australia just could not.
It's hard to undersell how incredible this matchup is. Mm-hmm. It's just really hard to like you said, we've had a lot of impressive season opening matchups before. Houston versus Oklahoma last year. Those were 2 very, very good teams. It's not like Alabama, Florida State. It's just not of the same caliber. I picked them both to make the playoffs, and I think both of them clearly can withstand a loss and make the playoffs, but it's getting at what you said. The margin for error is gone. If you lose this game, you either have to run the table or lose some game on a fluke. Like, no team has ever made the playoff with 2 losses before. So
they might make an exception, but are they going to put in a team that's already lost to one of the playoff opponents? It's already been proven on the field, hypothetically. And you're talking about 2 teams from arguably the 2 toughest divisions in football. Maybe the Big Ten West or Big Ten East might fit in there, but the SEC West and the ACC Atlantic Division are both stacked with teams that could win or could beat these 2 teams. And if one of them suffers a loss, that's a hard gauntlet to run.
Definitely. The one other week one game that I want to spotlight, Michigan plays Florida. I should mention that. The other game that I'm most excited for, though, is West Virginia playing Virginia Tech on Sunday. Obviously not anywhere near the stakes of Alabama against Florida State, but I'm very high on Josh Jackson. This will be really the nation's introduction to him. And it's also the return of Will Grier, the former quarterback at Florida, who transferred after being suspended for PED suspension, now with the Mountaineers. And I'm just excited to see if he's still got it. West Virginia's fan base is one of my favorite in college football, and Virginia Tech, I like a lot about their team. In addition to Josh Jackson, I think they have a defense led by Bud Foster that's constantly great. I just think there's a lot to be excited about with that matchup as an undercard.
It's going to be a fun Saturday.
It's going to be a fun Saturday. It's going to be a fun year. Thank you for tuning in to Ringer University. We'll be back next week.